There we go. Starting the stream.
Thank you.
And both look to be live.
All right. Good morning, everyone. This is episode 311 of the OotiniCast, being recorded at a very special time, which is very convenient for Blay. Not so convenient for Jill, and really terrible for me. So it is actually 4:30 a.m. as I speak. So on Monday morning. So most of you
are you being a little quiet because of the kids and Ari?
I am. They're asleep, and well, of course they are. It's 4:30. So anyway, the reason for this is on Friday this week, we're going down to the Gold Coast because I'm going to do a 10-kilometer run on Saturday. Just because you do. So anyway, the timing would work out that I wouldn't be able to record the show, edit it before I head it out. So this way, we'll record now. I'll edit it during the week, and it'll go out somewhere around the usual time. Anyway, don't expect anything too intellectually robust from me this morning. Second cup of tea already, and it's not helping.
Yeah, it's a weird time for me too. It's 11:30 a.m. in the morning, and it's going to be 100 degrees today, so very hot. Ooh. So unfortunately, I can't really turn off the AC, but so that you're going to probably hear a little bit of background noise because of that.
You should probably crank it up,
too. Well, yeah, I mean, in the house we have it set but you can't really get it down to room temperature. That's crazy expensive. So right. We have it set at like 78, which is still, when it's 100 out, it's a lot of electricity. So
yeah. Oh yeah. We'd set ours at about that. That's fairly comfortable.
I don't think it even gets to that temperature in Wales.
Unfortunately, even though this room has a register, between the window being here on the sunny side of the house at this time of day and having to shut the door, it's pretty warm in here.
Right. Yeah, not a lot helps if you're on the western facing and getting the sun, or
southern facing window, which is why I don't have any artificial lights on me right now. And normally, even in the summer, when we do the 4:30 time, I do have the artificial lights on because by then the sun's moved on.
Gotcha. All right, let me just retweet you both. I'm sure the sun comes from a different direction given where we are on, well, more or less. The north-south part of it is a little bit different. All right. Now I do have to keep it down. Let me just check my audio levels before we launch chill. Let
me do that too. Test.
This is a test, talking normally without booming. Maybe I'll crank that up a little bit. Test. Wow, that didn't make any difference at all. All right.
Hang on a sec. I think test. Okay, it didn't move. It's moving it. Okay, I gotta.
Oh, I forgot studio. Yep.
Shoot. I mean, I put it on studio, but it's still making it move. I might have to restart, unfortunately.
Okay. Yep. In which case, I might have to duck out and come back in. Yep.
Okay. All right. Sorry about this.
That's all right.
When this happens.
In the meantime, let us entertain you with some amusing anecdote. No, I haven't got any. How about you, Jill? I mean, Blair?
At 4:30 in the morning, I can't imagine that you would have that many sort of amusing anecdotes, to be honest with you. The only thing I can give you as a sort of compensation is I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning 3 days a week now, and 6 o'clock for the other 2 days. Last week, I was up at 4 and out of the house by 4:45.
God. Now, is this a regular thing going forward?
Yes, it's a new thing going.
Test.
Pretty much ever now.
Okay.
Is this because you have to leave early or you want to leave early on those?
Test.
Okay,
it's good now.
I want to leave early rather than staying in work until late, like I have been. So.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, it's not rolling it anymore.
All right, then let us get the show on the road.
Yeah, I don't know why it decide to do that with my mic. Okay. All right, going in 5. Hi, and welcome to the OotiniCast, the podcast that is calling up a Hammerhead Corvette. This is episode 311, being recorded on Sunday, June 25th, 2017. I'm your host, Chill, with our producer and co-host, Tio. Hi, Tio.
Hey, guys.
And our guest today is Blay. So, Blay, what you been up to?
Hi guys. Well, I've been up to quite a lot since the last time I saw you. I think the last time I saw you was the show just before I went and built a nice new Lego snow speeder. It's the one that was about 1,700 pieces. I streamed all of that. That took me a couple of hours. And then the following day I went and broke my PC. Well, to be more precise, I went and broke the on button on my PC. So I was without a PC for a month. So after the end of the month, finally built myself a new rig, which I'm using now. So
nice.
Got new, it's nice new. It's the new iCore 7 and all that business, so it's running really nice. And then I got back into the game, and since I got back into the game, I've just been grinding CXP. I've finally managed to make it to 300, something which I thought I'd never, ever, ever do in a million years.
Well done. Yeah,
very nice.
When you got a group of friends and you're just doing flashpoints, getting 2 levels per flashpoint, something like that, and plus the weekly, it goes really fast. Really, really fast. I think I did something like 160 levels in just over a week. So that was pretty good.
Is it your perception that with the changes that they've made, it is that much faster than it was in the early days?
Yes, absolutely much, much faster. Especially with the command boosts as well. Those are really worth it to get to 300. And then once you go up to 300, then obviously you got that perk for an extra 25%, so you can get extra
on your
characters up
alts
as well.
Very nice. Now, are you focusing on your 300 just to get more and more gear, or are you switching to your alts with that bonus?
50-50. Done a little bit of trying to get the tier 4 gear, but at the same time, it's like, I'm not doing hard mode ops, so what do I need tier 4 gear for? Better off spending my time doing other characters and enjoying myself doing other classes for a change.
Very nice. All right.
So, yeah, and today then I did an operation just to get a PARS, so I can try and have a look at the analysis for how the effects are going to affect soak healing.
Before and after, you mean?
Yes, well, but unfortunately though I did story mode Ravengers.
Okay.
And hardly any healing needed in it at all. It's been nerfed so badly.
Oh, really?
Oh,
I was DPSing for most of it.
When did that happen, or is that just more the reset with the current level of gear?
It could be a reset with the current level of gear, really.
Yeah, okay.
But
or they reset everything and, yeah.
Yeah, the story mode was just so easy. You just blasted through absolutely everything. That's it. It's been a busy couple of weeks.
Excellent. All right. And Tio, how about your week?
Sadly, nothing to report in game, though I'm going to try to actually play some this week. It's still the work and family stuff, and this weekend I've been building a cat enclosure. Yes, you heard that right. An enclosure for cats on the side of the house so they can go outside without actually escaping. So completely unrelated to anything Star Wars, but there you go. The cats don't even have Star Wars names. About 12 meters long, 3 meters across.
Oh.
So
12 meters, 36 feet long. Wow.
Yeah, that's just the side of the house. So.
Yeah, it's like a whole side of the house, essentially.
Yeah.
Huh. Is it, and it's totally enclosed, like even up to the ceiling?
Well, it will be when it's finished.
Right.
You can get too much done, but yeah. With kids and everything else, it's just busy, busy, busy. So, yeah, anyway, that's my week such as it was. Over to you, Chell.
Okay. First, a shout out to the chat room. 87.2's here. Hey, 87, he's been on my streams as well. Anu's here. Anog, Arcceptor, Kaz M. Kare, Dekion, Fiona, GM Kitty Kisses, Inkata1, Jedi Cyfrog, Jockins, Liberoha, Resident Jason, and Sledster all here. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming at this very unusual recording time. And right, so yeah, a few things the last couple of weeks here. Since like the last patch, I've been getting this odd startup bug. Like if I'm on my character select screen and then I go to another program to like work on my stream or tweet something out or whatever, the client crashes and I have to restart it. I'm not sure what's the deal with that, but it's been pretty consistent since the last patch. I'm not sure why that is. So what I've found is that I just have to get everything rolling and then log into the game. I mean, there's no other way to do it. But no crashes once I'm in game, so that's good. But just kind of an odd moment there in the character select screen.
I can give you a tip to get around that as well if you want.
If you know something.
Using Windows mode. Or using full screen.
Yes, I think I have to because I have two screens and I need to be able to look at the other one for, while I'm streaming and so on.
Yeah, if you can switch it back into full screen before you log in, it will run no problem at all. Then it will just start up, and then once you're in game, then just switch it back to Windows mode, and that will solve it.
Wow. Okay.
I can give it a try, I guess. Not sure if that would work with the stream or not, but we could try it.
Give it a shot.
All right.
Chell, before you continue, I did want to mention that the first episode of your podcast, which you put out, is out, Crypto Biography Episode 1, and I got to say, I really enjoyed it. It was extremely well done. So if you haven't listened to Chill's new show, Crypto Biography, you can find it at cryptobiography.com in iTunes, and there are links, so you can actually just subscribe to it normally. Anyway,
Thanks.
fantastic effort, sir.
Yeah, and second episode will be out later today. All right. In-game, I've been playing the nightlife event, just sort of as a relaxation thing when I'm, watching YouTube videos or whatever. You can pretty easily do the nightlife event. In fact, I would recommend doing it that way because it is a grind unless you're incredibly lucky. I'm up to 2.6 million credits with no Gamorrean Guard companion yet.
Oh, no!
Yeah. So I've got over 50 golden certificates and 6 GWL speeders. No Gamorrean Guard. So, yeah. It looks like I'm up for another grind this time. If I remember the last one correctly, I averaged 2 million per Rancor mount. I got 2 of them, but the first one was like 3.8 million, and the other one came like right away later on when I was just goofing around one time. So, yeah, it looks like I'm in for another long stretch here, so pretty ugly. But it's not a big deal. It's just credits. And let's see. And I've almost finished leveling Chill Rogue. After that, I have some ideas what to do next. I'm not quite certain, and it may depend on whether I get a Gamorrean Guard companion or not, because that might be actually fun to run around with for a while. So yeah, looking forward to that. I guess I'm gonna have to keep grinding for a while and see if I can get one. But yeah, I've got plenty of speeders to send around to my characters, though.
See if you can hit the 5 million mark, Chill, before you get the guard. That'd be great.
It might happen at this rate. I'm over halfway there, so. All right, and we've got the tip of the week next, and just one tip. Tio, do you want me to handle it?
Please do.
All right, it's from Tiedra, and it's quite a long one. Tiedra from the Harbinger server. It's been a while since I sent in a tip of the week, so I wanted to write in with a couple of things that people may find useful to know. First of all, there's a new mission that I believe was introduced with 5.3 that is called Introduction to Conquests. This quest rewards a decent amount of CXP, plus 20 unassembled components, ship and fleet wreck, and a grand chance cube that you can either open or sell, as it's not bind on pickup. The interesting thing about this quest is that if you've ever completed Conquest on your toon, it will auto-complete, and even if your toon is not level 70, you will get the same rewards. Minus the CXP, you'll just get regular experience. Since we know that they are talking about making UCs legacy-wide, logging in and getting those components is a good value in and of itself, and those grand chance cubes are a great reward. Wow. I was unaware of this. Is this...
I did not, and...
I take it it's on the fleet somewhere?
Don't know.
Yes. I think it's in the PvP area.
Now, Tiago did mean a game update 5.2, given that 5.3 isn't out yet.
Okay, so it's
but
this
yes,
last one.
Apparently it is in-game.
Very cool. All right, my second tip, Tiedra continues, has to do with something that was mentioned on the last podcast about upgrading to 248 and how you have to have the previous tier. My tip would be to save any shell that you get from 236 to 242 and just stock them away in your bank even if you have multiples. The reason for this is that so you always have extras to upgrade to 248 at a later date, whether it's for your alts or optimizing your main tune's enhancements. And if and when they make UCs legacy-wide, it won't matter which tune you use to upgrade certain pieces, so having those shells stored somewhere will make upgrading faster for you. Also, you do not have to have the piece you are upgrading in your inventory at the time you're purchasing the token from the vendor, as it will pull it from your cargo hold, but you cannot have it equipped.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's kind of... I didn't know that
sure
part
it never
either.
used to be like that with the PvP gear upgrade.
Right,
so
right.
They've just treating it like currency.
That is cool.
Brilliant. One of those little quality of life things.
Very much so, yeah, exactly. It's a currency
and
now.
that's great advice. So storing away, and they did say they are going to make those pieces legacy-wide at some point. They didn't confirm that for 5.3, I don't think, but Keith has been talking about that, so brilliant.
Yeah. And my final tip has to do with those totally awesome weapon tunings that are now unlockable in collections. You can share those tunings with your tunes via legacy weapons, just like you can crystals, so you can save yourself some cartel coins unlocking them by sending them to alts via legacy weapons from whichever tune added them to collections in the first place.
Oh, wow. I never thought of that. That's even more brilliant. Yeah, just like we did with the crystals. So the trick is just to repeat it, put them into a legacy weapon, the actual tuning, mail them to an alt, or put them in your legacy bank and pull them out again. I think you would actually have to pull them out of the tuning, pull them out of the legacy weapon and put them back in, and you're good. They're in your collection. You can then manufacture one for nothing and put in your own weapon. Then mail it back to another alt, and so on. Awesome. And something we should re-emphasize, as was noted, weapon tunings are now in collections. For the longest time, you did have to they were unique. You could only have the one of them, and only one character could have them. But now, you can just unlock them in all your collections, or just use this trick to get them around.
Right.
Brilliant. Again, nice stuff.
All right. Well, as there's only one, the winner is Tiedra. Congratulations, Tiedra. You're the winner of a Ton Fawn or M83R droid pet code, courtesy of BioWare, and an OotiniCast provided cartel market pack from the latest shipment. If you'd like a chance to win the same, please send your tips to OotiniCast@gmail.com by next Wednesday. And that will bring us to the holo feed. Tio?
Now, it's just been over a week since our last recording, but there is a ton to go through because, well, Keith, as noted previously, is prolific, and BioWare have very much been increasing their communication with the player base. So we'll start out with some general stuff, and we'll finish with how the team actually uses feedback to shape the direction of their development, which they went into some detail on. But anyway, let's start with a simple bug. If you're crafting the latest relics, which are the 246 relics, item rating 246, they actually have the same on-click and proc stats as the 240 relics. In other words, the tier before. So this is definitely a bug, and they're going to fix that one in Game Update 5.3. And you don't have to blow them away and remake them. They will just automatically update. So just be aware of that if you've created the 246 relics and noted the stats are bad. Don't destroy them. Just hang on. They will magically fix themselves in 5.3. Now, if you're one of the lucky people who plays on the East Coast of the United States, you would have experienced some queues. This would have been Friday or Saturday US time. It lasted for a while, and it's happened before. So you log in, you're presented with like hundreds or some number before you in the queue. This shouldn't happen because there's plenty of capacity on those servers. And we did get a response from Keith, who was responding to some pretty nasty comments from the player base, it seems. And anyway, he said that it's apparently related to the new data center. Now remember that he said that they've migrated, I think, both the East Coast and the West Coast to new data centers and upgraded all their hardware in the same time. So as part of that, apparently there was some configuration change that they haven't isolated, probably to do with database settings or something like that. Because when you set up your database for your servers, there's all these tuning parameters. In theory, they should all just move across to the new hardware, but with new hardware, there's some of those settings get a little specific. some of the capabilities of particular machines, and so something probably just ain't quite right, and things can go wrong. Now, some people said they experienced a rollback, but from BioWare saying that probably would have been very minimal, and the time lost would have been 30 to 45 minutes at most, but very few people should have been affected. But if you were, anyway, they're working on it, and hopefully this won't happen again. There will be a maintenance this Tuesday on back-end maintenance, and that's what that is at the moment, just trying to sort this out.
Okay.
And apparently the Harbinger went down yesterday. During the day, I noticed it was down as well. So, yeah. These things happen, and it will settle out over time, as once they're properly settled into the new data centers. Okay, so in the cartel market, we have an embargo, which means they're going to take a bunch of stuff off the cartel market. Technically, it could be forever. In reality,
practice,
it never is, because it always comes back eventually. But at the moment, and until this coming Tuesday, 27th of June, which may already be passed by the time you listen to this, by the 27th of June, it will be removed. There's a whole bunch of armor, a bunch of mounts, pets, toys. They kicked the Hutball emote, I believe.
Yep.
That's a bit sad. And the GSF experience boosts. The minor, major, and the 5-pack are going away. I wonder why that is. Yeah, don't know. It's kind of weird, actually, that it's disappearing entirely. However,
yeah, good idea.
these items
No
will be in
idea.
the gold and silver decoration packs, so which are now on the cartel market. If you have a look, they are available again. So those packs just contain items of that particular level of rarity.
Right.
Now, I'm also assuming that all these things that are going away will always be in the loot table for the Grand Chance Cube. So if you open a Grand Chance Cube, you always have a chance of getting this stuff. A very, 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 very small chance of getting any specific item, but it's still there. It's non-zero, just like getting hit by a meteorite. So, yeah.
The one that worried me on that list when I first saw it was the command boost. But then I noticed it's the command boost, not the superior command boost.
Oh, okay. The command boost is 25%. The superior is 100% increase. Is that true?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, I remember it was a crazy amount, so you'd be silly not to run with that if you can afford it. And you can get those with command tokens, can you not? The 100% play?
Not sure. I've been buying them off the cartel market because I've
In that
had
case.
a couple of months worth of the free coins, so I've just been using them up.
Gotcha. All right, okay. All right, so there's that. And next we'll talk about, briefly, server mergers. No news. There is a thread in which they've asked people to give their opinions. They clearly have some plan in mind, and you can help shape the direction of whatever they eventually decide to do by contributing to that thread. So they're in gathering feedback mode at this time. All right, the roadmap. Keith's roadmap. It's a gift that keeps on giving. He did throw in a few more responses to people. Someone said, what else is being considered in addition to the PvE version of GSF, which isn't happening this year, or probably ever? Someone was asking about stuff that's found that will benefit the foundation of this MMO as opposed to useless theme park content that'll be abandoned after a few months. Something that will be constantly relevant or universal. Now, what they presumably mean by that is not story content or missions or anything like that, because that's theme park. Like, WoW, World of Warcraft is a theme park, and that's the kind of content you get, quests. So Keith in response said, we are in the process of providing more MMO content, including updates for the variety of game systems offered by SWTOR, including Flashpoints, Operations, PvP, GSF, whatever that means. Are they going to do a new map? Anyway, story updates, such as the new daily area with the story accompanying it, companion changes, just to name a few. And these efforts should benefit the foundation of this MMO, which it does. So, yes, in addition to the theme park content, which he enjoys, he is hoping for increased dialogue, etc., on extra stuff that they can do to improve the game generally. So this is just continuing the theme. If you've got comments, you've got ideas, put them in the forums or in various other places, as it turns out, which they do monitor, because they are listening, especially under Keith. They're listening better than ever. Alright, what else do we have? So some guy asked for the Tracer missile animation to be sold on the cartel market, the original one, not the one that's there currently. And apparently this guy's going to keep asking until the end of time if he doesn't get it. So Keith said yes, he's going to actually do it. He's going to put it on the cartel market as the most expensive cartel market item ever. Yes, but you're the only players likely to purchase it. The things you do. So apparently he's going to do this to stop the guy asking for it.
Well, he says he'd look into it, but I don't think that's...
You don't think he's going to do it, Chill? Really?
No.
You think it's just a joke?
I think so. I think he's joking. Yes.
Right, all right. All right, what else? Now, someone was asking for combining GSF, Galactic Starfighter, PvP, and flagships into one giant PvP match. So using GSF to actually board or somehow disable a flagship, then your players board someone else's guild flagship, and then they battle the defenders. And Keith said, yeah, that's a great idea, and they'll look into it. It's a kind of organised open world PvP sort of. But he's going to talk to Charles about whether that could actually work. And the chance of that actually happening is pretty much zero, but great idea. Great idea.
It would be amazing, yeah.
Yeah.
You could either be in your GSF Starfighter or boarding on a boarding party. That'd be really cool.
It would, yes. No doubt it would be fun, as would a hell of a lot of things, but yeah. And finally...
The first thing I'm going to do is turn my flagship or my guild ship into a maze. I'm going to have so many decos on that thing. They won't be able to find their way around the place.
Genius. Genius. Alright, and last, in terms of the roadmap, he did answer a question about add-ons. Now, add-ons are things that players, or third-party developers for that matter, can actually write, and then players can download and load them up, and they work with the game. And Keith agrees that's just not going to happen, because if they screw it up, the coding of those add-ons, you can try to protect against it, but there's always some way around it. You can crash the game client, which is not good, and BioWare doesn't want to be in the position of policing that kind of stuff, so they're not going to do it ever. People have been asking for this because other games have, like WoW, for example, has add-ons, but yeah, never going to happen. But they are interested in improving the UI, and they have gone out of their way to improve the user interface over time in response to player feedback. The UI that we have now is, remember, the whole editable interface, the interface editor that we have.
Mm-hmm.
We never used to have that back in the old days, and you were just stuck with what they provided. What they were able to do to make that so you can tailor it is fantastic, and apparently he's going to make it easier for us healers. He means for everyone, but mouse over healing was something that other games have, where you can just hover your mouse pointer over a particular character's portrait in the raid group or the party group, and then just click a particular button to use an ability, rather than having to click on the character, select them, then use the ability. I don't know. I got so used to it in SWTOR that, yeah. But mouse over healing was a great thing. So having it in SWTOR would be good too, but we live without it. Alright, last in the news. Let us talk about feedback. So what was asked was, how is feedback used and obtained by the team? And they decided that Keith, Charles, and Eric himself would actually respond about how they all interact with feedback, because obviously they're in different places in the organisation. Eric is a community manager, Charles as the creative director, and Keith as the producer and the guy in charge, basically. So Eric's post was probably the longest, and he talked about his job being taking user feedback and presenting it to the rest of the team, and in some ways acting as a proxy for players to the rest of the team in various design leadership meetings where they talk about this kind of stuff. So, and as a way of doing that, he picks up information about what players are thinking from various places, including the official forums, the SWOTOR subreddit, and he sort of thinks of those more or less. He's put them up together, so he'll read both Reddit and the official forums. And apparently they read everything, even if they don't respond, and they use those threads. They pass them around internally. They will link to Reddit posts and threads on the forums within the team. So when you post stuff, it is not necessarily falling on deaf ears. Next is social media. He focuses on Twitter, usually as a way of getting real-time feedback out to the player base, but also as a general sense of what people are liking, because you've only got a small number of characters to actually express your opinion, so it does tend to be succinct and usually not very informative, but you can get some sort of feeling for what people are thinking based on their responses to stuff you post, and just trolling for #SWOTOR and hashtags like that. Then there are the influencers. There's a group of us, all the podcasts and a lot of YouTubers, streamers on Twitch, that kind of thing. So we are a source because we've got somewhat of a more direct line. When we receive feedback from our listeners or viewers, we can pass that on to the team. And again, we're a kind of another specific kind of focus group for the developers to talk to. Again, more highly invested than most, given the content that we create, but again, just another avenue to investigate. And finally, actual focus groups. This is where they get people in to talk about stuff, and focus group can obviously be live in Austin, where they actually get players into the studio, or they can organise it ad hoc with players all over the world, just email or whatever else. So if you ever get tapped on the shoulder, why not participate, help shape the direction of the game a little more directly. And as far as I know, you can't volunteer to be in a focus group, and they do tend to cycle through them, use new players every time, depending on how it's done. That way you get a fresh group of people every time when you're running new ideas. Alright, that was Eric talking about that kind of stuff. He also mentioned in passing they use the public test server, feedback from that, data analytics. They've been doing that since the game's inception, just seeing what people are actually doing. There are some idioms about that where if you want to know what someone's really about, don't watch what they say, watch what they do, because that is, and there's an actual psychological term for that, which I can't remember what it is, but what it means is people can say all kinds of crap, but what actually matters is what they are actually doing.
Right.
And if you can measure that, that's worth a lot. All right. Now, someone asked specifically, so what kind of feedback is the most useful to the team? And the response was stuff that is where you tell them why what you are asking for or talking about is needed. Don't just say, I want this because I like it. Give them a reason, because that will actually have if there's some logic behind it, if there's some aspect, some pain point, and you describe why it's a problem. Don't just say, blah, blah, you must do this, and full stop, because I'll just end up ignoring that. Next is Keith, the producer. He talked about, rather than how the feedback is obtained, what they actually do with it. So here's the kind of stuff that Keith looks for in feedback. Specific ideas about gameplay improvements, ideas on how to enhance existing game features, conversations about gearing and class balance, details about likes and dislikes about an area or type of content, how we can improve communication, and provide better insight, and kudos for the team when they do something right, so we can pass it on presumably, and constructive criticism when we don't do things right. Note, he does disregard rants and dumping on the dev team. So if you say nasty things about them, or you just go on a big long rant, their eyes will just glaze over and they will skip it, because why wouldn't they? yeah, and apparently he reads all the comments in discussion threads that they start. My goodness. He must be one of those people who's just a voracious reader, just loves reading stuff. He also gets messages from people using social media, email, LinkedIn, forums, and private messages. Though apparently he only just discovered private messages were a thing on the official forums, and he's got a bit of a backlog which he's working through. So if you've PM'd him, someone will eventually get to you. And someone said, minor changes can get added to the game quickly, but major changes, such as PvE GSF, will take a while to actually get going. So Blay and anyone who is involved in software development knows that, yes, if the train is rolling, if you're going in a particular direction, little course corrections are easy to make, but if you've got like a whole new track that you have to build and go in a new direction, that will take time, and you have to schedule that stuff probably months in advance to get resources onto it and get it happening. So yes, but little things they can tweak, sure, they can do that relatively easily. Not instantly, because they actually usually have to patch the client or the server back end, and who knows how long it could take. Right. Let's see. So that was Keith. And when he presents it to the rest of the team, he personalizes it by blending it with how he plays the game. And it has become evident over time, Keith plays the game a lot. A lot. Certainly infinitely more than I do at this point. And so if there's any advocate for the game better than Keith, I can't think of one. So, yeah. Blay, you had something to say here?
Yeah. I would never, ever, ever want to sort of discourage the just sheer amount of feedback that we're getting from them at the moment. I think it's actually really, really good and should be encouraged.
I can hear a but here.
No, there is no but. I have never known this much engagement coming from Keith and Eric and Charles in the entire time I can remember reading anything on the forum. At the moment, it's absolutely great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't liking what they are reading, but, but you know,
yes.
yeah, what we get now is more of a sort of an insight into the mechanics of how they work and the sort of engine and systems that they're going through than we've ever had before. It's been a bit of a black box before, where you just felt like, okay, I'm getting given feedback, but I don't know how that feedback's getting to them, if it's getting to them, what they're doing with it. And now they're actually coming back and they actually say, we are listening, we are paying attention, and these are the things that we do. Some people don't like that. Some people don't like it. I don't see why they don't like it. Personally, I think it's absolutely great.
Have you heard any reasons why people would possibly not like this level of feedback from the developers?
I think it's more to do with, with one or two people, from what I read, it might be a case of they didn't like the fact that their feedback seems to be ignored.
Okay.
But they can't pay attention to everyone's feedback and
Indeed.
do everything that everyone wanted. Because if they did, then, if you got two bits of conflict in feedback, then what do you do?
Got to make a decision. It's also worth noting everything here. They have said they're being more open and transparent, and they are. Everything they've said is consistent with what they've said before, and it all just rings true because there is nothing here that seems fishy or suspicious or anything. People are skeptical, but I don't see why. They're just being open and honest, and the proof of the pudding is in the eating. We've been eating it for a while, and it's actually pretty good. So don't want to take the metaphor too far, but it's just good. All right, but actions, as noted earlier, speak louder than words. So all the quality of life stuff we've been seeing recently is clearly indication that they are listening to feedback and acting on it. But there's also the obvious point about where is the game going. And even though we've got our roadmap, which Keith put out, that only puts us a few months out, so we don't know where they're really going longer term. maybe they don't either. There's a comment on that a bit later, which I'll get to. But anyway, now Charles. Oh, did Charles do this one? Now, there was some question asked. For example, overwhelming feedback says we are going in the wrong direction. Should we turn around or just ignore it? So, and how do they respond to that? And the answer is it really depends on the actual topic and the timing of it. There's no just blanket answer to that one. He gives an example, Operation Boss Fight, say the ones that have been on the PTS. If they get feedback saying the mechanic wasn't fun, or the fight was too easy or too hard, or they don't like the mechanics or whatever, they will review the feedback and do what they can to fix it and make adjustments. Sometimes it's not possible to completely redo it, but with things like numbers, in terms of just how difficult or hard something is, they can adjust those, tweak them. They can't make it perfect, but they can make it certainly a lot better. So yes, they are obviously listening. And they use the example of the Gods of the Machine bosses, the Tithe and the Twins, as examples of things that were on the first on the PTS. They did evolve over time in response to feedback. Next one, where along the journey is a point of no return? Someone asked. Is it before the bus starts moving, before the bus approaches a corner, before the cliff, before it goes over the cliff, or when you crash? Which is another interesting metaphor. And the answer is pretty obvious. Timing is everything. If you get to it early enough, it depends. It really does depend. So if they're really invested in something and they get feedback that says, oh my god, this is not going to work, sometimes they've really just got to bite the bullet and go with it. So the example given here is with Kotfi and Kotet, and there's some more detail about this, but basically they did adjust the way Kotet would be delivered based on the feedback from Kotfi, but they couldn't change Kotfi at the time as people were playing through it. It was too late. But so there was a bit of lag time. And in fact, they made a major about turn, which we will talk about briefly in terms of the whole Knights of the series, which surprised me actually. I've never heard this one before. Galactic Command is another one where when they were getting the feedback, it was a bit crap at the start. Or there were all kinds of ideas to improve it, but it took them a while to implement. But we've seen that patch after patch, it's just got better and better and better. Extremely complicated, but certainly better. So,
yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. They were hoping that that they would be able to keep the gearing the way it was going in, but then it turned out the randomness was just affecting too many players negatively. Yeah. And they kind of knew that, it sounds like, before it even launched, but it was too close to the launch, so they had to they had to start working on other plans. So that's what they've been doing.
Exactly. Yep. And as anyone who's actually delivered software knows, if you start discovering anything fundamental or some nasty bugs right before delivery, you haven't got much choice. Sometimes you can actually delay, and they have delayed themselves. Other times, if there's workarounds or you could tweak something or even switch features off, you just got to do it, get it out there, and then patch. That is how live systems work. So, yeah. How would you like it if they just said, all right, Galactic Command's a bit screwed. Let's just delay it for about 3 or 4 months until we fix it. No. Particularly a game which has to make money, otherwise it gets shut down. These guys got to make profit. Now, the interesting part, someone asked, you ever swerve, turn, or put the brakes on? This is the bus metaphor continuing. And they say, it happens all the time, but you may never notice, obviously, because you never actually get as far as seeing the bad idea manifest too far into reality. But apparently, the end of the year changes are what they're going to be doing at the end of the year is very different to what they had planned just a few weeks ago. And they did that based on various internal discussions, feedback from the sources that Eric listed, and determining what was a priority and the impact of schedule based on what we could and wanted to deliver. So in other words, they took all of the feedback over the last few weeks and completely changed their direction. Now, we won't see that because we don't know where they were going, but they're going to end up somewhere different. So, yeah, they're listening. So what that means in practice, I don't know. Does that mean we're not going to get another expansion? We're going to get something else? Yeah, okay. Now, lastly, Charles, now what he decided to talk about was to answer some specific questions about how the feedback is. He's going to answer some specific questions about feedback.
Okay.
Now, he gave a example of how a given piece of feedback was planned, what was planned, how feedback was received, and what they did in response to that feedback. And this is the interesting part. The original plan for the whole Knights of the series was to have 3 expansions. Knights of the Fallen Empire, Knights of the Eternal Throne, and Knights of the God knows what. But in response to the feedback they got from Kotfi, they decided to compress that story down to just the 2 expansions. So Knights of the Eternal Throne turned out to be the second one, and second and last rather than the third one, rather than dragging it out. So that is a very apparently concrete example. They were going to milk this puppy for a lot more. Story would have been going for a lot longer, but they decided to compress it down. And as you know, with Knights of the Eternal Throne, they even did it the binge style, so you can just release it all at once and then just binge on it, Netflix style, rather than trickling it out over the months. Again, all in response to player feedback. So if you didn't think they were listening, I mean, these are clear examples where they really are, and they really are changing course. And with Keith in charge, it's just going to get more and more like that. Now, just some specifics on that in terms of what they didn't like about Coffee. They felt the story was dragged out because monthly chapters, at least partly due to that. The companion focus chapters were not as well received because they were just perceived as filler, and I remember we actually talked about that ourselves in terms of just those chapters which just delivered a character, a new companion, and nothing else would. Why are we doing this? What about this main story? The impact of choices, because they tried to make good on that in Kotet. And some people didn't like the core premise, the whole new empire, the Eternal Empire expanding on Vitiate, Valkorion, etc., etc. So they did make some changes. They couldn't really change the story, the creative vision of it, because that ship has sailed. Because you do all your voice recording, your voice acting way ahead of schedule, way ahead of time, so that it's ready. But they did change the monthly chapters to be focused on the core storyline, which meant there were less of them, etc. Now, he did actually say, and it's interesting, that it turned out that if they just relied on the money coming in, Kotfi and Kotet were their most successful expansions ever, they say. I don't know by what metric they judge that, presumably by number of people playing, how much money they made, whatever. And so if they just listened to that, they would just keep on doing the same thing. That's what they would have done. But they didn't. They listened to the feedback and made all of those changes to tailor the experience to what people actually want, which is really cool.
Right. Well, yeah, I understand. It's probably just, I would assume that they're just talking about raw dollars because that's when they changed back to a subscription model, which meant if you want the story, you're going to be putting out money at a regular basis, where, before that, if you were preferred, you could eventually get everything anyway. So I think that's probably just based on raw dollars coming in, I would assume, and that the going back to a subscription model essentially has been successful for them.
Yeah, agreed.
I think story though has to be a quite expensive process for trying to get new content out, because the amount of voice etc. that you must have in order to do it must be incredibly time consuming.
Yes, and that takes away from other aspects of the game, but those MMO bits which were kind of left to wither on the vine, well, obviously they've watered said vine. It is now blooming once more. We'll have some nice juicy MMO bits to sink our teeth into. That's another metaphor that went way out of control. But anyway, you get the idea. Now, they did talk, as Charles obviously is very interested in story as one of the writers, and he did mention that story is one thing where feedback is, as mentioned earlier, hard to actually do anything about. there's a lead time, but there's also the whole point that a given story is what it is, and some people like it, some people don't like it, but you just got to tell your story, and yeah, and you just got to stick with it, because you can't just completely change direction necessarily. Just got to let it play out, and maybe the next story is different based on feedback from people. Now, as noted, I would personally provide, this is my personal taste, a more immersive world with a whole lot of little stories, and that is our SWTOR, and they can add little stories over time, just like the missions that are throughout the original game, and there are so many of them, which you now have to switch on in your map to even see the things, the exploration missions, as opposed to the core class and story, the planet-based story arcs. That's what I liked. All those little vignettes, the little stories. Imagine a world, especially with the NPCs, actually have sophisticated enough AIs that it's not the same every time. It isn't just a particular little story, but it all adjusts. Anyway, that's a dream for the future when processing power is a lot has increased to the level where that is actually possible. I'm not holding my breath, but it would be nice. Liba Aroha wants me to sit on my hands. Why?
She thinks you talk with your hands a lot, is all she's saying.
I'm half Italian. It comes with the genetics.
See?
Sorry. I will be self-conscious about that for about 30 seconds, and then I'll forget and do it again. So anyway, now what else we got here? That's where we talked about that. All right. So anything else on that, or?
Long live good feedback. I like the feedback. I love the amount of information that we currently get from the team, and I'd like to see it continue.
Yeah, and I like the insight we got into sort of like how feedback is actually used, and we kind of knew how it was gathered. I mean, there's only so many sources, and it sort of makes sense that, you know, they would take all of them and use all of them, but a little more insight like we got into how it's being used, and that it can, in fact, change things, you know, beyond just the money coming in, and not just the economics, is kind of a nice point of view to have.
Yeah, and to re-emphasize, the main point here is that if you want your feedback to be paid attention to, make it constructive, give some reasons why you think something should be changed. If it's just an opinion, well, there's a rather crass expression I could use, but let's just say everyone has an opinion, but if there's something specifically wrong, or you've got a really good reason why something should be added to the game or changed, something that would be a really good quality of life improvement, put it in a constructive, useful, friendly way, and it may actually be incorporated into the game. You smartass. Chill. Anyway, that's the news.
All right, that'll bring us to the first feedback where we read out your tweets and emails. And Johnny, born to eat bacon, wrote, kudos to the tip of the week from Quirkus regarding backing people off of your slot machines with Wampas and Celebration Jawas. I used it to win. A goof was trying to circle the 8 machines and use them all. Enter the Wampa and the Celebration Jawa and the Hollow Dancer and the Dusk Ackley pet for the win. That's right, I'll bet the Dusk Ackley is a pretty big pet. Yeah. Long legs. That's great.
Yes.
What I found is that I just go to the PvP instance. There's hardly anyone there. And because it's Imperial or Republic specific in those casinos, there's really no PvP there anyway. So it's kind of a win-win. As far as that goes, if all you want is to get is a low pop server.
You haven't been ganked yet?
No, because in the casino, they're actually separate casinos.
Of course.
Yeah. They have different names and everything.
That is a brilliant tip, Jill.
Thank you. And one also nice thing about that is, like, if you go from a PvE server to a different PvE server, like you just choose a different PvE server, and then you log back into that character, you're just going to go into whatever, one is kind of active. If you go to the PvP server and log out, when you log back in, you'll still be in the PvP server. So,
and
doubly
you mean
helpful.
PvP gameplay focus area.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, awesome tip.
Yeah.
Would you like an M8 3 or a?
Yes, I have both of those.
Indeed, you do.
Yeah, actually, the it's funny, the M8 one, because they gave it as a like a subscriber benefit recently. It's like I get those twice in my mail now, and the second one, of course, is grayed out. Can't actually do anything with it. Oh. So, unfortunately, it's not quite as useful as it used to be. Just as a general question to you, when you follow up with people who did the tip of the week, do they usually choose the Tauntaun or do they choose the M8?
Funny you should mention that. The Tauntaun of late has been more popular, but just now last couple of months actually, people have been asking for the Droid. So I've got a list of codes for both, and I've just been working through them steadily, and they seem to go down at roughly the same rate. So let's call it 50-50 at the moment.
Interesting.
Overall.
Okay. All right. Continuing with the feedback, Darth Mom writes, "Who remembers how to find your UI configuration files for SWTOR so I can move them to a laptop?" And Johnny directed Darth Mom to us and referred to our guide, which Tio made ages ago and is still relevant. It's OotiniCast.com/2013/11/moving. And it'll be in the show notes as well.
November 2013. My goodness, that was a while ago.
Yep.
And in fact,
it still works.
I used that guide as well when I got my new rig, because one of the things I had was a backup of all those files on a certain folder, on a certain drive, and when I put in the new rig, I just copied all those files and away I went. No problems at all.
Absolutely. Yeah, I did the same thing when I got my new computer six months ago. Ricky wrote in, "More of a general podcasting question. Your voices are always clear and intelligible, even when I'm in heavy traffic. Which microphones do you guys use?"
Well, part of that is, of course, the actual audio processing, but we all use decent mics. Myself, I use a Sennheiser that I got from a music shop probably maybe 20 years ago. I doubt they're available anymore. But it's an analog one, so uses an XLR connector connecting into a mixer. So you can not rather than USB, which is what many people use.
Right, I have a USB mic. It's a Samsung C01U, and I've had that since basically when we did the start of the podcast. So it's it's almost 6 years old now because I did buy it ahead of time.
It has served you well.
And yeah, exactly. And I've used it, and it's been great. It does sound pretty good, and I do use a pop filter as well. And I'd say also, though, in regards to our podcast specifically, because we record it and record everyone's voices on Audacity and use those files, Tio, you do, when you sort of edit it together, it ends up being a lot clearer than if someone is simply recording off of a Hangout audio or something like that.
The audio processing I do does remove the background noise fairly well.
Yeah.
What about you, Blay? Didn't you get yourself a new mic recently?
Snowball.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
from
kind of a classic.
Blue.
Yes.
An Australian company, allegedly, which surprised the hell out of me. I'm sure it's made in China.
At the moment, I'm hanging it upside down. I used to have it facing upwards. Now I got hanging from above now, so quite apt for Australia.
All right. Jim wrote in, "Just listen to 308 and your talk of what can be done with a full-blooded Sith as a slave in this sorcerer storyline. Funny, I just started a sorcerer with a full-blooded Sith character. I kind of laughed when you guys started talking about the subject. I figured my background as such. One line of ancestors, descendants of Calig, disgrace themselves as cowardly in battle and being not force-sensitive. They were enslaved by another Sith family. Generations passed before Wanitsu was born. Wanitsu Gennari was born and raised under Monkas as a slave. He expected to live as a laboring servant, but was approached by a master of the Sith Academy on Korriban. The master sourced the force in Wanitsu, purchases freedom from his slave masters. From there, Wanitsu was sent to Korriban to train as a Sith. Wanitsu passed his trials and was able to free the Dashad from his prison. He overcame his rivals and found himself the apprentice of Lord Zash, and so on and so forth. When he encountered Kalag in the Dark Temple, Wanitsu finally understood his heritage and destiny to restore his name and gain power in the Sith Order. I'm having fun leveling this guy and look forward to bringing him up to full power. Thanks for the great show. Cool, Jim. Yep. It's always nice to add a little bit of background RP to a character, even if you don't necessarily do much with it, in-game. I like doing that too.
Ducky was asking, is the temperature going up in your room, Jill?
Yeah, it's getting pretty warm.
All right. Now, Sarlacc Digest, we're going to talk about class changes, but we're going to keep it to no more than 15 minutes. I'm watching I've got the baby monitor here, and my daughter's waking up. But she's not getting out of bed before 6 a.m. So anyway, we've got at least 15 minutes.
All right. That will bring us to the Sarlacc Digest, where we go over the issues for 1,000 years, or until we run out of time, which in this case will be about 15 minutes, apparently. And we're going to go over all the class changes that are upcoming. And Tia, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Let's firstly start with a bit of philosophy from the combat team. So, as you know, within SWTOR, in the development team, they have a group of developers called the combat team, whose job it is to, apparently they design PvP maps, among other things, but they also are responsible for class changes. So obviously that affects PvE as well as PvP. And what they decided to tell us this time, and the too long didn't read version, is they don't balance disciplines against each other directly when they're doing the balancing. Balance is based on target values, which are determined by what type of damage dealer you are. And the categories are interesting. Ranged, melee, burst, sustained, etc. And they go into more detail about those. You've got the exam in an hour, Liba Aroha? Good luck. Sorry. Just caught that feedback out of the chat. Caught on my eye. Now, before they dig into it, they say there's going to be some big, and we now know there are, nerfs and buffs coming in Game Update 5.3. We've already talked about some of them, at least the reasons behind them. But the entire message they're trying to get to here is that they aren't saying that Sorks are better than, God, I'm blanking, mercenaries, for example, and particular disciplines they're in. They are saying that they have targets for various categories of damage dealers. Now, they focus on damage dealers here because healers, the 3 healing disciplines, are all in the same category, and the tanks are all in their same category. Healings is based on heals per second. For tanks, it's damage taken per second, as in how much can a tank mitigate in terms of incoming damage without dying.
Okay.
Healing is obviously how much healing you do. DPS is how much damage per second you actually do. So, here are the 4 categories. Firstly, of DPS, melee sustained, and they are tuned so that their output DPS is 5% above the target. There is only one target, just to make that clear. There is target DPS, and they are actually above that, 5% above that. The reason for that is these tend to be your melee, in your face, people who have to, and with a ramp up. So my old Watchman Sentinel is an obvious example of that. Burst is a bit crap, but Sustained is fantastic. And that's because it's 5% over. Because it's hard to actually keep your character on the boss, because it's usually some sort of effects you have to move out of, or chase them around, or whatever.
Right. So they reward you if you manage to stay on them 100% of the time.
Yep.
But they know you're going to be punished if you're off your damage for too long, because then you got to ramp up again.
Exactly right. Then they've got the category called melee quasi-burst damage dealers. And that's pretty much just concentration sentinels, or Fury Marauders, which is a mirror. They get 2.5% above target DPS. So basically they've got some burst, but their sustained isn't bad either. They're sort of in between.
Right. This is the smashback, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You've got your melee burst and ranged sustained. So melee burst, as in you can do some burst damage, but your sustain just isn't as high as your sustained DPS. And also in the same category are your ranged sustained, and they are at the target DPS. So whatever that target DPS number is, and that's pretty much, there are 8 disciplines, 16 in total on both sides. So that's most disciplines fall into that category. There's ranged quasi-sustained damage, and that's just dirty fighting, gunslinger, virulent sniper. And finally, ranged burst damage dealers. And they're minus 5%. So the ranged quasi-sustained damage dealers were minus 2.5%. Ranged burst damage dealers down 5%. So the DPS is tuned to be 5% below the target. So if you're just doing a pars, they will do less damage overall, but that's by intention. Because, and they say explicitly, that they have the least or no impediments. They can switch targets, they can just sit down, crank out the damage, no problems.
Right, exactly. So, yeah. So melee, more damage than ranged because you have to be on them. And then sustain over burst because, burst, they can switch targets really easily.
Yeah. Now, sustained is also considered, just like melee, to be inherently disadvantaged, which is the word they use. So, as we were just saying, it's just harder to do your damage. And so, I've got to say, it's a kind of coarse way of breaking them up, and how they put the disciplines into the different categories. I'm sure it's close, but you can imagine that every single discipline plays differently. But I guess if they're played optimally in optimal situations, that's how it would work out. Though I suppose they should try to apply it on average rather than for particular situations. What else? This is a massive post. I would recommend you read it in detail. They ignore things like class buff, stims, adrenals, because these will all affect things. They just got to assume a baseline, and then all of those things effectively change people in the same way. Class buffs, for example. But remember, any given character with gear, and gear is another factor, is just a set of stats, and that determines how much damage you can do, or heals you can do, or damage you can take as a tank. And so your gear, your buffs and everything, your stims, adrenals, all of that adds up to a bunch of stats, and their target DPS is aimed around that.
I think the issue which I have with the actual groupings that they put in is that it kind of ignores the actual mechanics of the game. So their groupings sort of assume that a ranged character can just stand at range and just fire. But when you're in PvP operations, you can't. You're constantly moving. They've got ads and bosses where you have to be within melee range, and those bosses move. So even as a ranged character, you're still having to chase around the boss in order to be able to damage him.
Yeah.
And to be disadvantaged with your DPS when the game mechanics actually force you to play like a melee character, but then they'll say, oh, well, melee characters are going to get more DPS. I don't think that's actually quite right. I'd like to see a slightly different grouping, perhaps. Something that doesn't, or starts looking at the actual game. I know that a lot of the people, when they're talking about X character needs nerf and the next character needs buffing, they're not always talking about HBS and DPS. Sometimes it's the utilities that they got on the classes. And we'll talk about this in a little bit, but I don't think some of the nerfs or buffs that they actually make into characters will actually fix stuff, because they're not making significant changes to their utilities.
Right. And yeah, they do mention that. Now, in terms of whether your discipline is actually getting buffed or nerfed, they have determined that based on, well, statistics, who's the most out of whack, basically, just to put it bluntly. If you're particularly overperforming or underperforming, they're the ones that are doing first in terms of adjustments to disciplines. As simple as that. You may not agree. That's based on their own internal playtesting as well as the raw numbers and feedback. But yeah. Now, a question that was asked. A given class is underperforming, why not bring it up to discipline this one over here? And the reason for that is the rising tide lifts all ships thing, as in if all who are underperforming make them the same as those who are overperforming, or those who are on target, raise them up, is that the rest of the game is tuned around the target DPS that they mentioned. As in boss fights, that's in flashpoints, operations, everything, and also the time to kill in PvP is also based on the target DPS. As in healing, counteracting that with healing, and mitigating it with tanks. Again, it's all based on that one number, target DPS. And so that's why they can't just raise everyone up, because they would throw everything else. Everyone would then be overpowered in terms of the content in the game. Now, Blade, I just wanted to address that. Sorry, that was just a point. Did they say something about utilities? Just that they're not changing them yet. They're not looking at survivability, and they're not looking at the utilities yet.
Well, none of the things that they've currently changed are talking about changing the utilities and changing the survivabilities. It's purely been about getting the DPS number down to their target. And that's it. That's all they've really talked about.
Right. Interesting. Deflector in chat asked, overperforming in terms of the classes who are being nerfed based on what? Because theory crafting numbers show much different data. Yeah, well, that's true. And makes me wonder, what models are they using to calculate this? Because it's not like they're necessarily parsing, though I would assume they have models for all of the disciplines in terms of how much damage they can do, the DPS ones anyway. And that is a simple calculation that they can do. They would presumably do parses as well, as in a player would actually try to do as much damage as they can against the target dummy and see how that matches up against their models, just to validate models. But a model is never going to be the match to reality. And do players all, on average, match that model, or are there some variation? You can see there is an obvious simplification in terms of if they just have the target DPS and these different categories and with a plus or minus percentage, and then they can use their models to determine how much the damage output is, and if it is a bit high, they can just tweak a few numbers just to bring it down. It is a logical simplification. Makes it easier for the developers. But as you were implying, Blay, utilities can sort of skew things a bit. Play style of a given discipline can skew things a bit. Yes, to melee, they're both melee, but one may actually be, for whatever reason, in terms of the abilities, easier to actually do their thing, even though the obvious disadvantage of having to chase a boss around or whatever. So,
well, even if you just looked at the pure numbers and just did a statistical model of, yes, this character could actually do this kind of DPS, if the rotation in order to do that DPS is so complex and we need so many button presses, I think something like 59 abilities per minute over a sustained 5-minute period, that's going to be very, very difficult to do.
Yep. Yeah, true. Yep. Absolutely true. As opposed to just sitting there beating up a dummy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that would skew things, wouldn't it? So unless they rely on parsers from actual fights, and it was never clear to me whether they have sufficient data to actually monitor real-time fights. Because obviously we can use tools like StarParse to record parses ourselves using the combat log, but is the game is the game server picking up sufficient detail to be able to do that? You think so? And they could capture parses, but are they? Can you imagine the sheer volume of data? I guess I could switch it on in some cases, but...
You could, but again, even with an operation, it would depend on what role you're doing. If you're the DPS who's supposedly having to kite one of the bosses in like Dread Council, then yes, you're not going to be doing as much DPS as some of the DPS which are absolutely hammering Bestia or something like that. It's you can't just look at how much DPS a particular class has done inside an operation to say whether or not that character or that person is doing any better than someone else. They're just doing their job.
In other words, they're using a very blunt instrument to actually do this. So it's probably simplification to say they're really just trying to get the target DPS down, or the output DPS down to the target plus or minus whatever percentage. But what is that output? And calculating it is, yeah, as you say, it's complicated, really complicated. I guess it gives them a place to start, and then they just tweak it a bit more based on feedback and real life parsers.
I think I'd like to see a graph with these actual numbers on. Because the other thing which I was thinking about when I sort of looked at some of the data for this is, they talk a lot about using an average figure, but average figures can be massively skewed based on outlying figures. And what it'd be interesting to see is what approximately 80% of people are achieving.
Right. Or the usual statistical analysis as far as it goes, having a large data set, getting rid of your outliers if you discounting them. As you say, someone who's kiting a boss, therefore not doing as much DPS if they were just going for it. Yes, you're right. Well, we've seen historically they have been slow to react to class people being overpowered for a long, long time. I do wonder sometimes if the models are one reason for that. The data is telling them it really should be this way, but people are complaining. No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not.
Well, one of the reasons for that they talk about as well is the fact that they don't like making changes mid-PvP season. And the PvP seasons tend to be quite long.
Yes, that's true.
Whereas what I'd like to see is small changes often rather than large changes at the start and end of a season.
It does skew things, doesn't it? I think that means we should stop doing ranked PvP.
I won't go that far.
Yeah. All right, let's finish up, because we haven't got much time left. Let's finish up with just the latest round of changes to classes and comment briefly on them. Next one is to Arsenal Mercenaries and Gunnery Commandos. This is all coming in Game Update 5.3. We'll just talk about the philosophy of the change. With the changes to these Arsenal Gunnery, they want to bring the discipline down to its target DPS, which we've just been talking about, and they wanted to make heat and energy cell management a little more challenging, as in more complicated, for the player, and so they slightly increase the cost of Blazing Bolts and Bolt Storm. In other words, you're going to be burning through energy and heat. They must have somewhat free reign, never run out at the moment. I haven't played my mercenary in a long time. And another goal is to tone down its burst damage potential.
It does have quite a lot of burst at the moment. I have seen mercs give us a countdown for when they're going to take aggro off the tank. They'll just go 3, 2, 1, and yeah, they got aggro.
Because they put out so much damage.
The burst that they do.
Anyway, Arsery and Gunnery may have been flavour of the month, but as of Game Update 5.3, not so much. Well, hopefully they're just back down to where they should be. All these changes can always take you below where you should be as well, as we've seen in the past.
Yeah, it's going to be a little hard to tell. Obviously, I'm not on the PTS, so I can't actually test these changes. Looking at the numbers, it does look like quite a strong nerf, but then they are trying to get this character down to 5% below. And if people are saying that it's currently above the target mark, then yeah, to try and reduce it down to 5% below, you would need quite a heavy nerf. But from people that I've talked to doing PvP, the thing they've complained about really is that mercs are effectively tanks. They can just take damage like there's no tomorrow.
And now that will come to a screaming halt. But as you said, they didn't touch utilities, so there may still be something in there that will make the survivability.
Yeah, there's still going to be tanks. Just tanks that hit less.
Yeah.
Although the decoy change is going to be pretty significant, especially in like one-on-one sort of situations.
Reduces the number of charges from 5 down to 2.
Yeah, it basically it's an ability that lets you ignore 5 attacks on you.
Yeah.
And taking that down from 5 to 2 is pretty big.
Significant, shall we say. All right, next let's talk about Pyrotech and Plasmatech. These are aimed to bring the discipline up to its intended target DPS. In other words, it's a big buff. They're doing various things. tuning things around. And they wanted to give the all too predictable Pyrotech Plasmatech a little more variability with the damage. So they're increasing crit a little bit in some abilities. So you should see a significant DPS increase. And par's about the same as Hatred Assassins and Serenity Shadows. So that's roughly where they're going to bring you up to, apparently, which is in the same category. Okay, sure. Any comments on that one?
I don't play that character much.
Okay.
Can't really tell you.
Yeah, not much to say, I don't think.
And now we've got Sork and Sage Healers, Corruption and Seer Disciplines. Coming game update 5.3. Apparently, these changes will undoubtedly look and feel harsh to players who have been healing on their Sorks and Sages for a long time. They pull the Corruption and Seer Disciplines down to their target heals per second. And when we say target, we say instead of... blah blah. We already talked about that. Yeah, so anyway, what do you think, Blay? You had some things to say about this. It's a big nerf.
It's an absolutely huge nerf. So effectively, they're changing our single target healing by affecting Resurgence and Innovate. They're trying to remove Roaming Mend, which even I will admit Roaming Mend is a bit of an overkill when it comes to healing. So they're trying to get that out of the single rotation and leave it as an AoE rotation. Although
Sure.
I didn't think it was actually brought in the first place for AoE healing. I thought it was being brought in for burst, because Sorks had very, very little burst, and that was the reason why it was brought in. But whatever, they're taken out. But they've also reduced our AoE healing as well. So reducing single target, reducing AoE, reduced burst, increased the cost, and increased timings on casting. Overall, it's absolutely huge. What I did earlier was I did a quick parse, and then I took all the numbers out of my parse log, and I applied these changes to all of the abilities
Right.
that I actually
Sure.
used.
Yeah.
And even bearing in mind that I was still using Roman Mend, which they are trying to take out, my Roman Mend was doing something like 20k per hit, and it does 4 hits. Which, yeah, that's why that needs nerfing, because it's effectively doing 40k on one character in an instant cast. So, about a third of someone's health in an instant cast, which is
Right. That is ridiculous.
Quite big,
yep.
yeah, quite a big heal. I totally agree. That that needs nerfing. That's a bit of an overkill.
But you think they've gone too far?
Yes. So based on the figures which I got, using the new numbers, I'll do 13.5% less healing. That doesn't include the fact I'll have to use consumption more often, and that some of my cast times will be affected. So also, if I take out Roman Mend, I'm losing 40k heal and replacing it with Dark Infusion, which does anything, well, when I ran it just now, is doing anything between 12k and 28k, depending on if I crit.
Right.
But that's a single target, that's a single character, as opposed to 40k on 2 characters.
So
yeah,
they decreased the healing of all the abilities, and looking at the list, and they made them cost more in terms of force.
yeah.
So, wow. I guess we'll see. Apparently they do claim they're just wrangling your healing output down to what the other guys are doing.
At this point, I
guess
wish
we'll
I
see.
was still playing all 3 healing classes, because then
So,
I'd be able
yeah.
to tell them, okay, yes. But at the moment, like I said, I haven't seen a graph to say that Sorks are this much higher than the other 2. So I'd be interested to see if they do actually nerf any of the healers. Or, my real big concern is perception within the game. Because one of the perceptions that happened when Sork Lightning first went absolutely, well, below what people seem to think it should be doing, was raid leaders in certain teams, or even within some pugs, if you try to get into a peg with a lightning sock, you get kicked.
Right.
Because they didn't want you in there, because they wanted to just run through the content nice and easy. And I'm hoping that doesn't start happening now with sock healing, simply because people perceive that you can't heal the content.
I guess all we can see is just see how it plays once it goes out, and if it is they've taken it too far, they will hopefully fix it. All right, now I'm really running out of time, so I'm going to run through the last one. If I disappear, could you guys both just save your tracks and upload?
Yep.
Sure.
Please. But yeah, so my daughter's, sorry, we're running up to 6 a.m. here, and I've got to get her out of bed soon, so... All right. Last change they talk about for Game Update 5.3 is Virulence Snipers and Dirty Fighting Gunslingers. Blay, you reckon it's fairly minor. They're just bringing the discipline down to its target, so it is a nerf. But some of these numbers look fairly significant in terms of the reductions.
Yeah, the big one on that one is actually the Cal.
Yeah.
Cal is something that you use a lot.
Yeah, 25%
Yeah, it's sort of the main
less.
nuke. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, that could be a pretty heavy nerf as well. Yeah. So anyway, so what have we got? 1 buff in this set and 3 sets of nerfs. So, yeah. Well, after they do all this, things will be balanced. Yeah, and as... who said that? Things will never be nerfed. Things will never be balanced. Fiona said, the game will never be balanced. Dream on. And this is bring back to what we were talking about with Blay. It's a really, really complicated system, and they can aim at their targets, but the reality is always going to be different. Some situations things are going to perform better, some worse than their ideal, and they can only do the best they can. And like all these changes to the Sorks and Sage healing is, wow, does it really have to go that far? As Blaze said, little changes, sure, but this is just, they've taken the nerf bat and they've just beaten the Sork and Sage to senseless. Anyway.
It's a case of wondering what role we are supposed to play. So yours had a situation where you had one healer which was really, really good single target, one that was good AoE, and one that was supposedly a sort of jack of all trades. And by nerfing absolutely everything, it makes me wonder, okay, so what am I supposed to be doing within a raid team now?
Right. Whereas now all healers are supposed to be able to do everything. And Alright, so going back to our theme on feedback from earlier in the news, if you don't like what they're doing and you can give them a coherent reason why, put it in the forums, let them know. Though they will probably ignore you on this because their numbers have been carefully calculated, and then wait until it plays out and it really is as terrible as you think it is. Take your pauses, put it on the forums, let them know, and hopefully they will adjust relatively quickly under Keith, especially if it's just a fairly small change that you can suggest. Even better if you can say, we need to fix this by adjusting this by this much. Yeah, that you've got a good chance of getting that change made. But Sork and Sage healers, it's not pretty. It's not pretty.
It does say at the top of the post, though, there are proposed changes, so it could still change.
Yeah.
They've changed in the past.
I don't know if they're on PTS and people are trying this out now. Maybe they are. Don't know. Alright, let's wrap it up there.
Alright then, that's a show. If you'd like to play with us in the Utini Knights Guild on the Republic side of the Harbinger server, or in our Guild on the Empire side, do a /c join Utini to join the Utini channel. Then let us know you're a fan of the show. You can email questions and comments about the show to OotiniCast@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter using @OotiniCast. You can find contact details for all of us on our website, OotiniCast.com, which includes how to subscribe to us using iTunes, Stitcher, and the rest. We record the show live semi-bi-weekly at Thursdays at 4:30 p.m. Pacific. Go to OotiniCast.com/live to find out how to join in. Our theme song is Doomsday by Jean-Paul Zogby. And thank you to the chat room, and thank you, Blay.
Cheers, guys. Fun as always.
Yeah, and we'll see you next week.
Alright, keep recording, I'll sync us up. Guys, thank you for watching at this very unusual time. And we'll be back to the normal time next time we record, and I'm still not sure when that will be. Possibly 14 July, maybe 7 July. We will see. And I believe Alex may be a guest on the next show. We'll see.
Cool.
Alright, anyway, thanks guys. May the force be with you, and or serve you well. Take us out,
Bye.
Chill.